So I can't tell you how excited I am to be here and how much I want to thank the SAG Foundation for giving me the opportunity, and us the opportunity, to share in the career of Beau Bridges, which he really has had one of the great acting careers, one of the great Hollywood acting careers ever. And it's not often talked about like that, but it's true. And when you look back at his credits, like I have been the last few days, you'll see some of the greatest directors ever who don't just hire him, they hire him again. You know, that's the best compliment you can get, right? As an actor, is when the same guy hires you twice, right? And it's happened to him with guys like Louis Milestone. He was in Hal Ashby's first movie. He worked with Peter Ustinov. We see him now in Alexander Payne and Cameron Crowe, and I haven't even gotten to his television career, right? He has something like 15 Emmy nominations. I lost count. You're going to have to Google that and check that for me. It's like 14 or 15. It's right up there. And 15. And he is up for Masters of Sex, his second time. He is the odds-on favorite if you trust Vegas, if any of you bet this sort of thing, if any degenerates out there that would bet on the Emmys, but I'm sure you wouldn't do that. Now, and he's hilarious on Blackish this year. I don't know if you saw that, but he's been making important films and doing incredible work, whether he's front and center or just brightening a corner. And he has the best part he's ever had right now on Masters of Sex. So please welcome Beau Bridges.
Morning. Hey. Thank you, Oliver. That was a nice introduction.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about you, man.
Cool.
So I've always wanted to ask you specifically about this, so I want to start at the very, 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 very beginning. Mm-hmm. What do you know about the circumstances of your birth and the events
that's a very
surrounding?
Very personal question.
Well, that's where we're starting. I told you we're starting at the very beginning, but because there were some interesting things happening in the world around the time that you were born.
Yes. Well, let me say this: that I've been thinking about my dad a lot this morning because he was an actor and loved the profession, and I'm a circus brat. I went to work at my father's shop, and he provided me with that first opportunity to join this family of actors, and I know how hard that is, and those of you who didn't have the leg up that I had, I mean, I really respect your tenacity and hanging in there and getting that first job. I know how tough that is. So I feel I was really blessed to have an actor dad who helped me get that first job. He also told me that was it, that I had to buckle down and work my ass off because only one guy gets the job. And he helped me get that first opportunity, but that he taught me right away, the work ethic, that you had to really put in the work. And he also told me, he said, it's not an easy business. This is early on.
Right.
And he said, rejection is like the sun coming up every morning. You're going to get it a lot. But I'll tell you this, he said, you can kind of relax because you don't do this alone. He says, we have a good family here that you feel comfortable with, but he says, now you're an actor, you're joining a whole other family that you don't even know about yet. That's the family of actors like we are right here. And he said, they will have your back. And you get in there on a tough scene, and it's something that makes you nervous, like the ones I'm doing now on Masters of Sex. I'm treading some unknown waters for myself, even though I've been around a long time. And I'm nervous when I go into some of these scenes that it's unknown territory.
That's pretty cool that you can be nervous after having done this job as long as you have.
Yeah, but then I get in there, and here comes Allison Janney or Michael Sheen, one of my buddy actors, my scene partners, and I just look at them and just listen to them and feed off of them, and it's okay. Everything's okay. We do the best we can. So now to answer your question, I just wanted to
Yeah,
talk about
don't
that.
think you're skating by that one.
Well, yeah, I was born December 9th, 1941, 2 days after Pearl Harbor was bombed here in Los Angeles. And Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, the hospital windows were all blocked out. They thought the Japanese were going to keep coming and attack Los Angeles. No lights, all candlelight, kind of romantic. And they used to sedate women quite heavily in those days when they were giving birth. So my mom was pretty wiped out. And after I was born, and the nurse came in and said, you know, what would you like to name your child? And they'd been reading Gone with the Wind, so they liked the name Beau. So my mother says, call him Beau, you know. And she said, call my child Beau. And the nurse said, no, you're mistaken. She says, you have a son, not a daughter. I guess you'd never heard of the name. So my mom said, I'll just call him Lloyd Burnett Bridges III. So that has been my name. That's my real name. Or the Turd, as my grandfather used to say.
Right. Right. Yeah, grandfathers can be like that, huh?
Yeah.
So you were Beau from the get-go. I kind of thought that stuck on you later when you started, but from the very moment you showed up, you were Beau, huh?
Well, sort of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what they've called me.
And it was from the book, not from the movie? Of all the classic films of 1939 that you could have a character named after you. I mean, you could be Ringo the Kid from Stagecoach or Oz, you know, from The Wizard of Oz, but you got Beau.
I got Beau.
Yeah. Have you always liked that? Have you thought about using the Third or any other name? Yeah.
I didn't want to give it up, you know. I mean, I liked the fact that it was my father's name. So even though sometimes it's a hassle because, you know, like on my driver's license, when I fly on a plane, you know, I get confused and I put,
right.
You know, I'm not sure what name to put down there.
When you sign the contract.
My assistant is over there, Niley. She has to deal with that sometimes, whether it's Beau or Lloyd or whatever it is.
But everyone calls you Beau. Nobody calls you anything else.
Well, it depends on how they feel about me.
Now, your acting and film career predates what you can even remember. You were in movies when you were 5 years old.
Yeah, I was. I can't remember the first one, but I think I was carried on in some movie that John Garfield was in.
Right.
But
yeah.
The first one that I remember was a movie called Zamba, where I was a 6-year-old child, and my mother liked to tell the story of how when I went to the director and he's talking to me about, you know, auditioning for the part, and he said, you know, in the movie you're going to be in a small airplane with your family, and the airplane goes on fire, and then you parachute out of plane over Africa, and you get hung up in some trees, and then these wild animals jump at you, and a big gorilla named Zamba comes in and saves you and takes you to his cave and raises, you know, how do you feel about all this? You think you can... And apparently I said, well, yeah, I'm a little nervous about jumping out of that burning airplane.
The rest is fine.
Yeah, but I did that movie, and what was the guy's name? Crash Corrigan played Zamba in a big gorilla suit.
Oh.
And he had out here in the valley, he had a place called Corriganville where they shot a lot of those old action movies. And it still comes on to haunt me every once in a while on TV, and they see me running through the jungle. Zamba, Zamba, save me, Zamba.
So, now, like those movies that you don't even remember making as a little kid, if you watch them now, do you think, man, I was good, or geez, that kid sucks?
Well, you know, it's just kind of a wonder to see me running around at that age doing this stuff. I mean, I did get in, I think, classic.
Did you get your SAG card back then when you were 5?
I must have, yeah.
Wow.
You've
been paying dues for a long time, man.
Yeah, that's right. I got in a pretty classic movie, though, when I was right shortly thereafter. You mentioned Louis Milestone, who, you know, he was a family friend, and I had just a little bitty part in The Red Pony.
Yeah.
Which was the Steinbeck movie with Robert Mitchum and Myrna Loy. That was, I think
and Steinbeck actually wrote the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah, he wrote
and it's still a pretty good movie. I saw it not too long ago. And I have like 3 or 4 lines, but yeah.
And Myrna Loy, who is your co-star in that movie, was also the inspiration for the statue that was in front of your high school growing up.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I went to Venice High.
Yeah.
And Myrna Loy was out there, and it's so sad because they used to, you know, the rival high schools, like Hamilton High, would send people over and they'd like tar and feather her or rip her arms off. So they had to finally put her in a cage, which I thought was really weird. Now they finally took that statue down, and they have a big, beautiful new one of her there. It's probably made of steel or something, so they can't do anything.
But then you basically retired, though, at the age of 8, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that you basically hung it up.
I did.
And you went on to not be in movies and not do that and become a kid. I guess kind of live the life that you've been drawing off of ever since somewhat. But
I can't remember how that happened, whether that was a conscious thing on my parents' part. I mean, I was really around the age of 8, I got really interested in sports, athletics. I did a lot of that. Maybe they didn't want to take me away from that. And I even had, you know, dreams of that maybe being a profession. That, of course, ended very cruelly and quickly when I went to UCLA to play basketball, and I realized I was a very small fish in a very large pond.
of course, that was the best thing you could have ever done for yourself, was to go on a team that included Gail Goodrich and Walt Hazzard to show you that, you know, maybe you should find something else to do for a living.
I think so. But I did consider coaching. You know, it's always interested me. I've coached all my kids' teams. I have five children, 4 boys and a girl, and love coaching. Really miss it now.
Well, that was an interesting thing when in the 1970s, when people asked you this question as to what you would be doing with your life, you figured you'd be giving up acting and you'd be going into youth mentoring and to coaching basketball. That's what you told people, at least. Did you believe that, and what happened, man?
Well, you know, I've had 2 really important mentors in my life. My father, who was my acting teacher, as well as a great dad, and my basketball coach at UCLA, John Wooden, one of the greatest collegiate basketball players, coaches and player, by the way, actually.
So one of the most significant figures in the history of this city, I would say.
Yes, and he left a huge impression on me. My father, by the way, played basketball at UCLA as well, you know, back in the 30s. But
you got a little bit more floor time than you did, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, I rode the bench a lot. But the amazing thing about Coach Wooden was that he stayed in touch with all of his players, even the ones that did ride the bench like me. And later in life, I ended up doing his voice on books of all his different books and stuff. And I would also go with him when he was getting awards, and I would present him with a lot of awards. He called us a dog and pony show. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I learned from him that was so tremendous was his pyramid of success. I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but it's really beautiful, and it relates to everything: acting, whatever craft, whatever you're doing. He developed it as an English teacher, as a matter of fact, not as a coach, when he was a young English teacher. And it's basically the blocks of a pyramid that you need to reach success, which is at the pinnacle. And for Coach, success had nothing to do with winning. It was finding peace of mind. Mm-hmm. And how do you find peace of mind? You find peace of mind by leaving the task knowing that you've done your very best. And then you can't lose. There's no such thing as losing. And the 2 cornerstones of the pyramid: industriousness, hard work, and enthusiasm, joy. Because Coach said anybody can bring hard work to the game, but when you bring it with joy, then that's when special things happen. And then all the other, you can find this pyramid of success if you Google it. It's tremendous. And then all the other stones are things that you need. And then at the very top, when it's game time and the opportunity is there, he divides the pinnacle into faith and patience. Which I think is beautiful, because you do have to have faith, and you have to be patient, because you don't know what's going to be in your way when the time comes.
I would say those two words that you just said are probably the things that actors need the most and find hardest to get, those two things. Because everything is making you feel like the bus has passed you by, or that nothing will come through in the end. There's things testing those two things, faith and patience, all the time when you're an actor.
Yeah, because you want to, when it's game time, you want to be relaxed.
Right.
You don't want to be uptight. I was telling Oliver when we were waiting to come on, my sister is moving houses, and my parents gave her kind of all the memorabilia of their relationship. They were married over 60 years, to keep safely. Now she's moving the house, she's got to do something with it. She's handing over a lot of my dad's memorabilia to the Academy for safekeeping, which is very cool of them. And they'll do right by it. But there's a lot of personal stuff in there, and that she gives once in a while. She'll send a little bit to Jeff and I. And I got something the other day that just amazed me, because my youngest son, Zeke, is 21. He's a senior at Chapman right now, and he's just sort of declared the fact that he really wants to try to be an actor. He's done a little bit of stuff in school. He just did a scene in Masters of Sex, actually. I thought he did really well, playing a homophobic fraternity guy in a bar who's giving shit to me and my new boyfriend that I'm sitting there in the bar with.
He gets to really hate his dad in his first.
Yeah, it's pretty
awesome.
Cool. But anyway, so I'm spending a lot of time with him talking about the craft, how my father taught me and all this. So I'm going through this memorabilia stuff that my sister sent me, the last little stuff, and here comes this letter, an old-fashioned letter. It's like on onion paper, that real thin paper, and I'm reading it, and it's notes from, I thought it was my dad's performance he and my mom were both studying with Michael Chekhov, legendary teacher, director, writer, actor, who had been a student, I think, of Stanislavski's. And my parents were studying with him. And they had told me a lot about it when they were alive, their experiences. But here was this 6-page thing of notes on a performance that they were doing. And it was all of their communications with Chekhov about how to prepare for this role. And it was fascinating. I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, my God, I'm reading my father's thing. And then I got to it, and it wasn't my father. It was my mother and her notes. And one of the first things she talked about was Chekhov's, telling them that above all things that you must be relaxed and come in easy and feeling, the word he used was feeling light. And it was great. And then he also talked a lot about the psychological gesture, which I remember my dad talking to me about, that idea that you find something physical, a way that you can, that expresses a scene, or even maybe your whole play, that expresses your character, whether it's, like this or like this. It's something that you don't show the audience, but that in your preparation, before you go on, you can hit this, and it just, what do you call it? It
triggers,
invokes, informs your whole performance.
And it's funny how those moments, I guess, when you prepare, find you. rather than you necessarily going out and search for them, those instances that end up defining the whole thing for you.
Another cool thing that made me think of is just now, as far as acting technique and all that, my dad only gave me one book on acting, and the whole time he was teaching me, and he gave me Acting the First 6 Lessons by Richard Boleslavsky, who was a Polish guy who was a student of Stanislavski's. And he gave it to me when I was about 16, and I loved it. And a lot of the reason I liked it was because instead of being just an instructional book on a craft, it was a story, and a very interesting one, and the dynamic there between the teacher and his young student, this young girl who he calls the creature,
Right.
who comes to him. You guys probably have heard
Yeah.
about this book.
Great
most of you.
book.
And in fact, a lot of universities use it and stuff. And I thought, this is great. So I gave it to all my kids, and I still hand it out. If I'm working on a show and I'm working with some young person especially, I'll give it to them. But I gave it to my daughter, Emily, who is an actress and also going for her master's now at the University of Minnesota, studying arts and cultural leadership, providing the arts to underserved communities, doing really good work, but she's a great actress too. And she and I wrote a play based on Acting the First 6 Lessons, a two-hander, just that she and I did at Theater West. And Sam French ended up publishing it.
Wow.
And it was, what a treat, to work with her. That book, I don't know, I love small books. That's my kind of book. And it really, I think Boleslavsky was probably the first one that came westward that took Stanislavski's method, his book is like huge, An Act of Repairs and the other ones he wrote. But this is a nice, small little book, and just, I think, within this dynamic of these two people, the teacher and the student talking, and she keeps returning to him all through her career to get another lesson. It's really cool.
But speaking of returning to, one of the things that so marks your family is that you all always return to each other. You always come back together. You've worked with your parents. Oh, yeah. You've worked with your kids. You've worked with your brother. A lot of people try to escape their family, right? They try to push against it, and they find creative freedom in defining themselves against that.
Yeah, that started with my dad, because I told you, like, he spoke about the family of actors, which he loved being an actor, and he loved other actors, and he loved working with his family. That's how, like I said right away at the top, that's how I got my first gig, was from my dad, going to work in his shop. And it was on his series Sea Hunt that he gave Jeff and I and my sister Cindy, we all performed on it, even my mom. And all through his career, he loved working with his kids. And then as Jeff and I got more established on our own and doing a lot of jobs, he would call us up and he says, "Oh, I hear you got another gig." I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Is there anything in there for me?" And I'd say, "No, Dad, there's not." He says, "Well, how about for your cousin, Marcel?" I said, "No. Anything there for your bro?" No. But yeah, we love working together. And I've worked with him many times. And I know Jeff did. I think Blown Away with him.
Yeah.
I work with him a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, I directed a film called The Thanksgiving Promise. It was a Disney special, a Thanksgiving special, and I put my whole family in it. It was a family movie, and it was so much fun. And my dad he had an important part in it. And that was funny, directing my dad, because he was a director too, And
I have a feeling that was not the easiest thing in the world to do.
no, and my poor son, my son Jordan, who now is
Rizzoli and Isles.
Yeah, he's Frankie Rizzoli and Rizzoli and Isles. That sucker got picked up for the 7th season.
Yeah.
I said, "When are you going to send me your check, man?"
I figured you'd be saying, is there a part in there for me?
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. But Jordan had the lead in that thing, and it was a coming-of-age story about a boy and his goose. And so, poor guy, he had goose wranglers, he had his grandfather, he had me. but he did a great job. But yeah, my dad, directing him was something. You know, he would be very patient with me. There's that word again, and he would, you know, listen to what I had to say. And it was, you know, the communication was open. I could talk to him, but then I'd have a directing plan. I would always meet with my cinematographer every morning before everyone else came in, just to get my plan together. And this one particular scene, I had about 6 members of this family all on the same scene. They were all around a truck or something. And I'd been talking about it, and my dad started, you know, he would say to me, and I find it a little irritating, you know, he'd say, how do you plan to do this? You know, and I said, well, you know, this is how I'm gonna do it. And he'd go like this. He'd put his hand down here where he thought no one else could see it, but I think they all could. He'd go like this. And then he'd walk around a corner, you know, just talk to me about it. And he'd say, you're never going to get it done like that, man. He says, you got to bring in a crane. I said, a crane, Dad? That costs too much money. This is a little television show. He said, son, you're not going to finish the scene. You better get a crane. I said, in the end, you'll save money. So I tried the scene, and it was a dismal failure. I didn't finish it in time, so we had to do it again. I ordered a crane and did it just like that. So I started calling him every night and saying, Dad, here's my plan. What do you think?
Now, yeah, well, I guess I don't have to ask you how you got your big break on Sea Hunt and, you know, the Kirk Douglas show. I mean, the Lloyd Bridges show.
Yeah.
But then you parlayed that into steady work on all the big shows of the '60s. You know, you did a spot on Bonanza and on Combat and
yeah, those were great times for a young actor.
Rawhide. Yeah, I mean, it was a really nice time to figure out what the hell you were doing.
Yeah, and the guest shots were always the most interesting roles in those shows, I always thought. Yeah, and there was a lot of good shows, you know, when I was growing up there in television. Yeah.
There was a lot. What was there a divide in your mind between being a television actor and being a film actor? Were they one and the same? Did you think of one as a
oh no, I mean,
rung above the other?
Or I just wanted to work, you know, and I thought it was great. And I think it's nice now that whole weirdness between film and television is all kind of dissipated, you know. I think that
it was prominent for a lot of your career, and did it play a part in your
especially for my father, you know, because he found his fame, sort of his fan base, with his Sea Hunt television show, and you know, he'd done some great movies, you know, High Noon, different ones, and he was kind of stuck in that adventure guy mold until he got all those crazy comedies he did at the end of his career. But it was tougher for him. But I got lucky. I was able to get out and really test waters in all the different medias pretty early on. I was on Broadway a few times and got into films, so it was exciting.
I saw that after you did one of your Broadway shows, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that you took out an ad for yourself in Variety, mentioning the good notices that you got.
Oh yeah, we all used to do that. That was.
Oh, is that the thing that they used to do?
That's what we used to do. Yeah.
Because and it worked.
Yeah, you know, marketing, that was something. Publicity was something that I really didn't understand the importance of it when I was a young actor. In fact, I thought it was kind of bothersome. But man, it's. You know, you got to sell the tickets.
Were you told to do that, or did you figure that out on your own, or were you?
I can't remember. I think it was kind of what all young actors really did. I mean, no one else was going to put up the money to get you to do it. You know, get your ad in there.
Were you uncomfortable, like putting yourself out there like that, or
no.
is it a natural part of the job?
No, yeah, it was at that time, it was kind of a natural thing. It was part of it, and then I grew to understand that hey, marketing, publicity is equally as important as making the film, almost. I mean, if no one comes, you know, what's the reason?
Now, it was Norman Jewison, right, who saw that clip and pinned it up on his bulletin board and ended up hiring you for one of your first films.
Yeah, well, I've been doing stuff for a while then.
He's a great director of Cincinnati Kid and
Yeah.
amazing Canadian director.
Yeah, Norman was a great director. And so I went to do Gaily, and the best thing about that whole experience was meeting his producer on Gaily, which is so weird because he was not built to be a producer, but I met Hal Ashby, who had been another great film that Norman directed was In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah.
With Sidney Poitier, and Hal had been his editor on that, and either was nominated or won an Academy Award for it, I think. But anyway, so I met Hal and we hit it off, but he was very uncomfortable in a producer's shoes, and I think Norman just wanted him to kind of see what that was all about. And then when Norman said, my next film is going to be an interesting one, The Landlord, and then Hal, I guess, they figured out, he sort of handed the show to Hal to direct. It was one that he originally was going to direct. And then Hal cast me in that leading role. So that was Hal Ashby's first film, and I think he's probably one of the great American directors of all time.
This is Hal Ashby, right? This is a guy that directed Shampoo, Harold and Maude, Being There, and he is one of the kind of great figures in the history of this business. Can you paint a picture of this guy?
Well,
because he's a unique individual in every. What did he smell like? What did he look like?
Yeah,
what did he?
When I first met him, he was living at the old Goldwyn Studios, which, if you remember, looked kind of like a castle. It has all those turrets around it and stuff. And he was like the wizard, He had this long white beard, long white hair. This is in the 60s. And he was living in Norman's office on the couch, and with his flatbed editing machine in there, and playing with film all the time. He just loved film so much, and total outlaw. This guy, he didn't have much, much to do with the suits, the people, those guys, but he loved film. And he made some great ones, and he became, one of my best buddies. When we did The Landlord, he got married during the film, and he opened and closed the film with his own wedding that he filmed. And I'm his best man, and you see me in a white Nero suit, and he had us hit our marks. We had to stand up there, and the minister and everything. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. He was something else, man. That movie was a great movie to work on. Our cinematographer was Gordon Willis.
Oh my gosh!
Willis, who did, the Godfather movies, and his operator was Michael Chapman, who also won
Raging Bull and
won a lot of awards.
Wow. And that's a movie about a young rich kid who buys a sort of tenement in a slum neighborhood and remakes it. And the slum neighborhood, you should know, was Park Slope, Brooklyn. Which is you were the only person who can afford a place in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in this room.
I tell you, not at that time. And what was interesting is this movie was about gentrification.
That's right.
About white people, establishment coming in, buying up slum property and kicking the tenants out. That was the story of it. And I remember getting there, and there was another movie, Cotton Comes to Harlem, which had been filming in Harlem about 2 months before we started filming our thing. And Park Slope was pretty much the same kind of black ghetto that Harlem was at that time. And I was nervous. My first day of work, I was dressed in a full white suit, and I knew that the scene I was doing was all these black dudes were going to chase me down the street. And in Cotton Comes to Harlem, 2 months before, this was when all the major cities of America were on fire in the Black Revolution. We were right in the midst of it, and I was making a film about the Black Revolution. And so Hal, what he did is, he said, I don't want any cops, I don't want any police on my set, in my location. He said, just introduce me to the baddest cat in the neighborhood. and I'm going to give him a job. And he did. This guy came up, he introduced himself as number one. That's all he said. He didn't say his name or anything. And Hal cast him in the movie, and cast him as one of the guys that chased me down the block. And so I hadn't met any of the other actors. I didn't know them. They were all a bunch of New York actors. I come out from California. I'm playing this part. I'm in the white suit. And the people it was a hot summer day, and the folks were all from the neighborhood were all lined up on the top of the buildings, like, leaning out their windows watching us. And as I took off running, these guys chased me. They had a long lens on. They chased me about 3 or 4 blocks down the street. And I can hear these people yelling, you know, from the top, "Get that white motherfucker!" You know, all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna die here. You know? And I ran all the way down there, and I'm way down, you know, at the end of the thing, and now I have to walk back to the crew, and I'm thinking, oh. And as I'm walking back, I feel this big arm come around me. He says, "So who do you like in the NBA? You like the Lakers?" You know, he's just kind of chatting with me about all this kind of stuff. Thinking, I look up at this guy. He's a big black dude, one of the actors that chased me. And I realize what he's doing is he's telling the neighborhood people, and this is where you get back to the family of actors. He's saying, "You want to kill this guy? You got to kill me first,
Right.
because I'm family."
Right.
It touches me for a second. That was Lou Gossett.
Oh, wow. It's interesting because a lot of your early pictures, and actually throughout your whole career, you have done things surrounding race, and race was something that you have thought about and expressed and done films about. When did you? I mean, what was your first experience with race, and did you kind of set out wanting to tell the kind of stories? You know, often the stories about the white guy, you know, in the surrounded by black people, or you know, these different types of stories that you ended up telling. When did you become interested in that conversation? It's a conversation we're stumbling through as a nation right now in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, probably early on. I mean, I remember my dad did a great movie called Home of the Brave. Cast a guy, Jimmy Edwards, a young black man, as his best friend. Stanley Kramer did it. It was a hit play on Broadway, but that part that Jimmy took was a Jew, and it was about a Christian and a Jew who were friends in high school and then went and fought in the war together. But Kramer wanted to make it a black guy, so there was a lot of secrecy involved and everything. And it was tremendous. And I remember Jimmy Edwards, you know, was a wonderful man, coming over, having a lot of dinners at our house. And I think that was one of the things that were the reason my father got called up, the House Un-American Activities Committee, was because he'd had a black man over for dinner to his house. You know, I mean, that was a weird time to live, man. And those, you know, McCarthy and all those crazy people. Oh my God, that's a whole other story. But getting back to the race thing,
Well, I might want to go into that whole other story.
Yeah,
but,
we will. But that. That was probably the first time I thought about it. And then I went to Venice High School, and I played sports. I played baseball and basketball there, so I was, you know, a lot of my friends were black guys because they, you know, they were athletes. They played ball with me. But at all the dances and stuff, we'd go, you know, and the black kids would hang out here and the white kids would kind of hang out there. And they all lived in a section of Venice called Oakwood. And then after high school, I stayed in touch with some of my friends. And then in the 70s, I read a national police report that Oakwood was the most violent crime neighborhood block for block in the nation. And there was a war going on between the Shoreline Crips, which was the black gang, and the V13, which was the Latino gang at that time. And a lawyer friend of mine, Andy Von Son, we started talking about it. We said, God, what's going on there? What can we do? So we went over there to the neighborhood, and we were trying to see, well, what do they got going for the kids? And there's nothing, not a thing going on. They had no little leagues. They had no organized sports. They had one sort of halfway house where people that were in jail, when they come back and re-enter into the community,
Right.
they come through this place. And so we got in touch with them, and we said, hey, what if we bring you guys a camera, and we start, these young kids that come through, these gang members, we'll start, showing them the camera. We'll start getting them involved in shooting movies instead of themselves. What about that? So that is how we started, and out of that came this organization that I founded called the Pearl White Theater of Performing Arts, and we lasted about 25 years in Oakwood, and it was made up mostly of the kids who had gone through those gangs, both those gangs, the Shoreline Crips and the V-13, and they worked together. And a lot of them have entered our business now as actors, as technicians. I see them sometimes. I'll be working on a job, and they say, "Remember me, Mr. Bridges?" I say, oh, yeah. But some of them went on to do some good work. One kid, Christian, was had a lead in an Oliver Stone movie, and then as we got going on it, I would. All I did was teach acting. I couldn't teach anything else, But then we got into martial arts and modeling for the young ladies, and it was just a tremendous experience for me. And so I guess that, so yeah, race, and my father, I think we had a lot of discussions about it, and we all felt, and I still feel, that racism is probably right at the very crux of every problem we have as a human race, just dealing with people that are different. I mean, why? Like here, this thing I'm doing in Masters of Sex, a closeted gay man in the 50s. People, define people by their sexuality or their, how they look, and it's so ridiculous. You need to define somebody by their capacity to love. That's what's profound. That's yeah. So that the cool thing about being an actor for all of us is we get to tell those stories that inform people about how it is and how it should be, and that's why I love to do it. That's why my father loved to do it.
And let's face it, it can be a hard conversation to have. People can stumble through it, and it's a brave thing to try to keep talking about it. Because we often screw up. It's hard to talk about. It can be hard to talk about.
When I first began, I didn't see. I guess when you're so close to it, if you're a family member of somebody who's an actor, my dad seemed to love it, but I didn't really understand. I saw it. He was an entertainer, and then the first time I really understood what it was all about is I was a young guy. I was probably about 21, 22. And Gordon Davidson called me up, and it was the second play that he directed at the Mark Taper Forum. He directed a play called The Trial of the Catonsville Nine. And I don't know how many of you have heard of that play, but it was written by Father Daniel Berrigan. He was a Catholic priest, and we had just bombed a horrendous bombing effort on Vietnam. We bombed a bunch of a children's hospital, I think it was, just hundreds of kids died. And Father Berrigan wrote his play right after that. And at the time he wrote it, he was the #1 guy for the FBI to get. They wanted him bad because he was going around talking against the war. And what are you going to say about a priest, And his father, Philip Berrigan, was doing the same thing. And these guys, they stole some draft files out of Catonsville, Ohio, and they poured pig blood on them, and then all sat around in a circle holding each other's hands, saying the Lord's Prayer until they knew that they were going to be arrested. And then they were arrested and on trial, and they were told not to leave, their state borders. and Father Berrigan, he was speaking at some big university somewhere in the East, and it was also a religious celebration, and they had flatbed trucks with all the huge giant puppets of the 12 apostles on the back of each of these trucks, and Berrigan got inside one of these puppets and escaped into his underground existence.
Oh my gosh.
And wrote his play. So Gordon called me and a bunch of other actors. He said, "Look, guys, I want to put this play on." He says, "We're going to do it quick." He says, the Mark Taper has this whole, schedule of plays that we're doing in the year. We're just going to insert this. They're mostly comedies and musicals. People won't know about this. We're going to put it in there. We're going to get it together really quick. And will you do this? I said, "Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting." So we rehearsed it for just a couple of weeks, and I remember I was playing David Darst, the youngest. He was a divinity student, the youngest of these people. These guys David Darst went down to Guatemala on a mission to work with people in terms of their diet and so forth down there. And when he got there, horrendous stuff, that we were doing to the Guatemalan peasants down there, our military, just killing them, just awful stuff. And that was his testimony in the trial, what he had found. And so I come to rehearsal, the second week of rehearsal, and everyone's kind of got their heads down. I said, what's the problem? They said, David, his car was blown up. He's been killed. He's dead. And so we have to change the beginning of the play, because in the beginning, what we used to do is show the newsreel footage of these guys holding each other's hands and doing their thing, and then the actors would come out on the stage and we'd greet each other, and then the play would start. But now that David was gone, his car had been bombed, Gordon said, "Beau, I want you to be the only one sitting in the audience. And when the other actors come out, they'll say, they'll greet each other and they'll say, 'Where's David? Where's David?' He says, 'You stand up in the audience and say, I'm here. They've killed me, but every time you put on this play, I'm going to come and give you my testimony.'" Yeah, and then when we bombed Iraq, I called Gordon and I said, "Gordon, you got to do it again, man, come on." And we did a reading of it, and John Ritter's son did my part. I played one of the older guys.
Wow.
We had a great cast, Marty Sheen, a bunch of guys, and we just read it. We didn't perform it, but we read it at the Kirk Douglas Theater.
This sort of, I'd almost call it a moral urgency, has sort of gone all the way through your whole career, which is not the easiest thing to pull off as an actor, right? I mean, you're just a hired hand, but think about it. Sea Hunt was the first time that many of the world ever thought about the health of our oceans, when your father would address that issue.
He and Jacques Cousteau came along at the same time, kind of.
Right, and it's really got people thinking about that and the environment and we mentioned race and these different issues that mean a lot to you and you have a personal stake in. Talk about negotiating those two things, being a working actor and caring about things and doing work that reflects what you care about and what matters to you.
Well, when I began, I kind of got the idea early on, and from observing other people doing this too, there was a lot of like what we called street theater in those days, where performers would just get out and do it. And I talk to young people about that all the time. I said, if you want to act, if that's your passion, just do it. That's the important thing. Get out there and do it. You can study about it and all that, but that's what's going to get you your chops, is to do it. And the great thing about being an actor is it's like almost like a musician. You got your guitar. An actor, he doesn't even need a guitar. You get out there, you learn a speech. I did a lot of street theater back in the '60s. I performed in prisons, in hospitals, out on the street.
Isn't there a famous story about you and your brother carrying a riser on a flatbed truck down to Crenshaw and doing Neil Simon, was it? Or
No, well, yeah, it was. It was
Neil Simon, in the
yeah, I used to, my brother was young, he was about 16, and I wanted to get him some experience. So he joined me.
That would be the way to do it.
Yeah, he joined me on some of this stuff. And we did. We went to, we were at a market parking lot. And what we do is you first come in, park the truck, and then you got to suss out where the police are because you don't want to irritate them, get them all excited. And we would usually, you have to create something to bring a crowd. So we usually, a fight is always a good one. And my brother and I, my dad had taught us how to show fight, so we start punching on each other and wrestling around, and the crowd come around, and then we jump up and say, oh, we now like to do a scene from Come Blow Your Horn. And I had a funky little, a little speaker there, microphone, but what was interesting about that was years later, actually, it was a payback because I was called by John Huston to come and audition for a movie he was doing about a fighter. And I came in, and he said, "God, you're just perfect for this in every way except the fact that you're probably about 8 years too old for the part." And I said, "Well, guess what?" And so Jeff went in there and got that role. I'm trying to think of what it was.
Fat City.
Fat City.
Great movie.
Yeah, with John Huston directed. But anyway, so I had, provided that little opportunity. Then years later, Jeff comes to me and he says, "Hey, I'm doing this great movie. The script is fantastic. I want you to, meet the director." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Fabulous Baker Boys." I said, "This young guy, Steve Kloves, wrote this great script." And I said, "Jeff, they're not, this is a pretty big budgeted movie." And my career was kind of, how it goes up and down, and I was kind of down at that point. I said, "They're not going to want me to do that, to play your brother. They're going to, they've got all kinds of people." And then I asked around, and yeah, they had some of the biggies that were up for that part. I said, "Nah, I don't want to. That you just go ahead and do that." And he said, "No, I want you to meet Steve Kloves because I want my brother to play my brother." So I went, my first meeting, I took this little Polaroid picture that I had of Jeff and I on the top of that flatbed truck, and I think that's what got me the role.
Oh.
Steve saw that and said, "Oh, yeah, okay, you guys can do it."
So were all the fights between you and Jeff staged, or did you guys ever actually? I mean, you're old enough from him that you probably didn't derive a lot of satisfaction in beating him up when you were little kids.
Yeah, I was. But our relationship was interesting because, being 8 years older, my dad traveling a lot. My dad was a very present father as much as he could, but he was on the road a lot, being an actor, and so I kind of fathered my brother, I think, in many ways, taught him how to throw a ball, all this kind of stuff. And my dad did teach us how to fight, how to box, how to, how to do show fighting, but also just how to defend ourselves. So we did that, and he actually, my brother, when he's about 16, 17, got me pretty good. We were in the garage, and he bopped me and knocked my head up against the fridge, and I went down for the count. And then in Baker Boys, there is a fierce fight between these brothers.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do it ourselves. We said, we want to work with a stunt person, but we would like to work it out because we don't want this to be, the John Wayne type of fight, throw punches. These are brothers that are just tearing each other apart.
You have experience with this.
Yeah, so we came up with the idea that we wanted a big chain link fence for the fight because we felt we could throw each other up against it. It would be forgiving in that way, but it could still look fierce. It would sound great, and then, he gets on top of me, like this. And, two piano playing brothers, so the story point was that he gets on top of me at the end, and grabs my fingers like he's going to break my fingers, you know. So I tell Jeff, you know, I say, look, I know you're going to be pumped up. You're going to be on top of me. You're going to grab my hand. I said, I want there to be a word that, you know, I can say to you that you know you're hurting me, so you'll stop. And he says, good idea, good idea. And I forget what the word was, ow, or some strange word that would be in the context of the thing. And he gets on there, and he's got this wild look in his eyes, you know, and we're bouncing up against that fence. We go down, he grabs my fingers, like this, and he's hurting me, you know, and so I give the ow, ow, like this, and he's, you know, oblivious. He's just, like this, and I finally had to say, you're breaking my fucking finger.
That's a good safe word.
They stop, yeah, they stop it. And I did go to the hospital that night. He did not break my finger, and, but, oh my God.
Did you ever get revenge on him? There's no scene where you get back at him.
No.
That's for a later date.
That was pretty crazy, yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, it is a natural byproduct of being an actor, of looking over your shoulder, of finding out about the next guy, of being in competition, and you're we're competitive in athletics, so competition has been part of your life. What role did competition play in your relationship, and how did you keep that from being something negative or poisonous?
You mean with my brother?
Yeah, with your brother, or in a greater way. But I was thinking specifically Jeff.
Because, you know, I was older, and also much more beautiful than my brother. There's no competition. That's what I tell him anyway. No, he's my best friend. You know, he is. But the competitive side of our business, that's tough. Like I said before, one person gets the job, and that's a hard part of it. Yeah.
Now, I think of one of your sort of quintessential early parts, and one that I certainly remember very well is Normal Ray.
Yeah.
Where you played Sally Field's husband and helped her, assisted her Gail Goodrich style right up to the Oscars and to the Academy Award there.
Yeah, what a great performance that was.
But talk about that role, getting that role, preparing for that role, and what that role meant to you. And again, it's another example of your social conscience playing a part in your career.
Yeah, well, there was we filmed that in Opelika, Alabama, and Marty called us all together, Martin Ritt, the director, and he said, you know, we have a chance to tell this story that is going to really change the fabric of this country, because it was about union. And at that time, there was only a few big industries that weren't union at that time. And he said there's a lot of people that are upset that we're making this movie in Opelika, Alabama. And he said, so you just got to be aware and get in there, we'll do our job. And then he said to me, he says, I don't know if it's really wise for you, Beau, to bring your son, who at that time was about, I think Case was maybe about 4. And he adopted my adopted son, black and white. And I said, nah, I'm going to bring my son. What are you talking about? So I brought Casey down there. And the first thing I found out, which I wasn't ready for, was when I go out at night and, see people hanging out and listening to music and everything. And all the black and the white people are all together down south. And they were at that time. I don't know. I haven't been to Opelika in a while. But I thought, whoa, this is weird. People here in California and the East Coast, and they're all, think that they've got it all figured out in terms of race relations, and it's all, peaceful. Well, I felt it was much more communication and togetherness between black and white people in the South than it was
Interesting.
around in my hometown. That's, you know, I don't know really what that meant. But anyway, that experience, that show was great. And Martin Ritt, what a wonderful director. Boy, he was good.
Didn't you sort of work as in the mill for a little while?
Yeah, we all did.
preparation?
Yeah, we all went to the mill and saw these poor people working. And I remember the
How
vibrations.
did people in a mill respond to
Yeah.
you know dudes from Hollywood coming in
They were
and
okay.
working
They were
next
curious
to them?
about it. But the machinery, you know, these people working in that mill, I mean, they'd just be vibrating all day long and inhaling this stuff that gave them what they call brown lung, all that cotton shit. And it was wild. But I remember an interesting acting, for me, a great acting story that I'll never forget was, my part, you know, wasn't a big part. I was her husband, and I had a few good scenes, but Sally and Ron Liebman really carried it. And my biggest scene was with Ron Liebman, who she has an affair with, or I think she did, and we're married, and he comes into the room, and I have this long thing to him where I tell him, you know, something about, you know, she got arrested, she had one dime, and she called you, and I had been kind of fretting over this scene. I knew it was kind of my biggest one, and you know, trying to recall and get myself emotionally involved and going into my own past and all the stuff that we do as actors, whatever we do, and came time to do it, and I did the first couple of takes, and Martin Ritt comes up to me and he says, "Quit acting." He says, "You know, you've got the Ravitches, this couple, man and woman, that wrote one of the most brilliant screenplays of our time. Just say the words. Don't act." And I was brokenhearted. I didn't tell him that, but I thought, oh God, I've let him down. You know, this is my big scene, and so I did. I said the words, and the scene is over, and I was kind of disappointed in myself. And then right after that scene, I had another little scene with Sally where she's in bed there, and I had just 2 lines to her. And I hadn't even thought about that scene because I've been worrying about this other one. And I get in there to do that scene with her where I tell her I'm always going to be there for you. And all the stuff, everything that I had worked on, all the emotion and everything, just was there and available to me. It was a real lesson for me, you know. Sometimes, you know, you work too hard, I think, at trying to get it exactly the way you want it and perfect without sort of, you know, basically giving it up to God. I mean, that's what when I feel the best, that's what I.
But at the same time, that's a lesson about, like, you never know where that preparation is going to pay off. You know, it might not pay off in a direct way.
That's
it's going to pay.
Yeah.
It's going to pay you off in a way that you don't plan for or don't expect.
It's like life. So much of what we do as actors is like life, I think.
Right, right. Now, sort of staying on this topic a little bit, what do you remember about working with Richard Pryor in 1982 in Grease?
Grease Lightning.
Grease Lightning, yeah.
Richard.
And I want to. How did he? How did you see him? And what did you take from him?
Richard, you know, I mean, I had been a huge fan of his as a stand-up comedian.
I'm sure you owned his records and.
Oh yeah, Magic Man, you know, and I met him, and I was so surprised because he was so quiet and reserved, and that's who he was. and then, I mean, I had great times where we did a lot of improvisation in there. I was playing his best friend, but at first we're against each other, and then we become best friends. About a true story about a guy, the first black guy that raced dirt tracks down south.
Right.
And he one thing he did is we had Pam Grier was in that.
That's right.
Playing his girlfriend. And I had a girlfriend. I can't remember the young lady that played my girlfriend, but we had a scene where we were having a barbecue, and the girls were supposed to be watching Richard and I do funny stuff, and you know, and thinking we were weird or something like that. So we did our part of it, and then when it came around to do the girls, and you got to know that Pam Grier, total church-going family. You know, she,
Right.
Rosie, her brother. You know, real strong Christian upbringing. And Richard says, "Look, we're off camera. When the girls are going to be looking at us," he says, "let's just drop our pants on the girls." And up until that point, he hadn't done anything that had you know, like that. He was very reserved. So we did it, and man, Pam Grier came after him with a broomstick. She was pissed. Another great thing with Richard was he loved to tell this. First of all, you know, the N-word was his favorite word when he was performing. He used it all the time. And so I turned it on him in my performance. I used it a couple of times on him as a Southern, you know, redneck boy. And
Was he expecting it, or did you surprise him with it?
No, I surprised him with it. And then he told the story to me, and I heard him telling it to other people too, where he chose to live, you know, again, we're filming in the South on that one, and he was nervous about it for good reason. Because I said later about how surprised I was that, you know, black people and white people seem to be communicating better than I expected, but also, you know, black people were being lynched and stuff during those times down in the South. So it was a scary place too, especially if you were black. And so Richard lived way out of town. And at the end of the movie, we were done filming. He said that there was a knock at his door, and he had his family visiting, his mother and everything. And he was kind of nervous. He wasn't expecting anybody. And he looked out the crack of the door, and here stands this old redneck guy. He says, "Hello, Mr. Pryor." I said, "Do you mind if I talk to you for a minute? I have something I want to give you, you know." Richard is nervous, and he's got his mom in the other room. He says, "Oh, what is it?" And he said the guy stood back, and the man had carved out of a solid stump of wood this perfect, like 40 Ford or whatever it was that Richard was driving in the movie. He had hand carved it.
Oh my gosh.
And Richard said it just, you know, stunned him. He said he saw this, and he said tears popped into my eyes. He says, I don't know what to say to you. This is tremendous. And the guy said to him, "Hell," he said, "I'll do anything for a good." And he said, use the N-word. I thought, oh man, that was bad. But Richard Pryor, I
feel like he kind of wrote that incident himself. It's sort of like a classic.
I saw him. Oh God, I saw an old tape of his. I showed it to my son. He said, "This man, what a genius Richard Pryor was."
Yeah.
Woo. God, that was a great experience.
Now, talk about sort of, okay, in the 70s, you were this hot kid working with a lot of hot directors, and there was there was a period where things shifted, and you were getting different types of roles, you know, less lead parts, and was there a transition in a mindset then, or was there a feeling of gosh, things aren't going as well as they did? I mean, did you feel down about
I think
about a shift that might have happened somewhat early in your career, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I think in the life of any actor, I mean, we're all frustrated, aren't we? Most of the time, there's it's not quite going the way you'd like it to be going, and
No one can relate to that here.
yeah, oh, it is, and yet, I feel very fortunate to have just made a living in this business, you know. And when that can happen, and there were times when I wasn't really doing that, and I was very nervous. But I feel blessed that I have been able to have a pretty long career where I've made a living at it. But it does change, you know. like I tell my kids, I say, you know, when you get rejected, it can be for anything. You know, it could be that, you know, your hair's not the right color, you're too old, you're too young, you're too thin, you're too heavy, or maybe, like what happened to me, the guy gives a job to his son instead of you.
Right, right.
There's all that going on too. I mean, it's not an easy business.
But you did persevere, and you always seem to, at least. I mean, obviously you have a different perspective, but you kept filling up your chart in terms of booking parts. Mm-hmm. Talk about going back into television. One of the kind of defining roles that you did, and you won, I believe, your first Emmy for, was playing James Brady, and the great gun control advocate and gun violence victim. Mm-hmm. Talk about that and the impact that had on your life. Mm-hmm. And I guess it has to be strange to the extent that we're still talking about those exact same issues that you were addressing back all those years ago that you made that movie.
Yeah, probably maybe 10, 15 years before I made that movie, I had a gun right here, you know, pressed against my forehead. So anybody's ever had that experience,
Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I will. But when you've had that happen, it's not a hard place to go to talk about the need for decent gun control. I mean, also my grandfather was a hunter. I hunted with him. I understand. I was in the military, a Coast Guardsman. I trained with a M1 rifle, you know, when I was 18 years old. I know what weapons are. I respect them, but boy, if they're in the wrong hands, I was in a coffee shop on Ventura Boulevard, and this guy came in. And I remember when I first saw it, I said, "Oh, he's an actor," you know, because it was an old cowboy type gun, you know, with a long barrel, and he was waving it around. He was jacked up on something. He came in, he went right to the cash register guy, put the barrel to his head, and this guy, probably some tough kid from some other part of town, he said, "Get that thing out," and he goes like this, and I said, no, don't do that. You know? And he ended up telling everybody to get on the ground, get on the floor, and I was reading a newspaper when he came in, having my cup of coffee, and I was so stunned that I just was frozen just looking at him, you know, and everyone else, there were kids in there, and probably about a dozen people. They all dropped down, and I'm just standing there looking at him, and he comes over to me, and he put that gun on my forehead. He says, "I said, get on the ground," you know. So,
wow.
And then, right before I get on the ground, he hears a noise in the back, in the kitchen, and he ran around there, and the stupid cooks had locked the door back there so that he couldn't escape, I guess. Or why the hell would they do that? But this was back in the days when, do you remember when Swedish clogs were kind of the rage for guys to wear? And fortunately, I was wearing those. And the minute he disappeared back there, I just stepped out of those clogs and shot out of that place, and I ran over to the next door restaurant, which was, I think, a McDonald's or something. And I could hardly talk. My mouth was filled with cotton. You know, I'm saying, "There's a guy," you know, like this. And she said, "Sir, please." And so I left her, and I ran across the street to another place. And I called the cops. They were there fast. And by that time, the guy had shot one woman in the leg. And they chased him up to some apartment complex and got him. But ever since then, you know, I thought, oh man, you got to have these too many guns, and if we've got them, if they're part of our fabric, we need to figure out how to control them so the wrong people don't get them. Anyway, then I got to tell Jim's story, and I went immediately to Washington, D.C. I didn't think I was going to get to meet Jim, but I wanted to meet whoever was the current
Press secretary.
Press secretary, right, who was Marlon Fitzwater at the time. And so I asked if I could be in the press room when he was there, Marlon Fitzwater, and I went, and Marlon comes out, he says a few words, and then there's a big buzz in the room, and everyone gets quiet. They say, wait. The door opens up, and here comes Jim Brady, and it comes wheeling out, you know. That was amazing. That's how I first met him.
Wow.
It was supposed to be a secret that we were making his story, so the people, you know, were all coming up and saying, well, you know, how come you guys are together in the same room? What's going on? And all this kind of stuff. But what a great guy he was. Oh, man. I mean, the first time I went to the White House with Jim, Barbara Bush is there, and she sees Jim, and as long as I'm there with him, I mean, he could go anywhere he wanted to go, you know, he's just a hero there. And so I'm walking along, and Barbara Bush sees us together there, and she comes walking up, she says, Jim, how are you? She says, what are you doing here with Beau? What's going on here? And I said, well, we're making a movie, Mrs. Bush, about Jim's life. She says, you can't play Jim Brady. She says, you're too ugly to play Jim Brady. You know, you got to be handsome to play Jim Brady. And Jim never let me hear the end of it. And they called him the Bear, so he would call me the Ugly Bear. But I just loved him. We just lost him not too long ago, and his lovely wife, Sarah Brady. Both those two were stars in my life.
Well, they did a lot for this country.
Oh, man.
There's two parts that I want to ask you about that I feel kind of typify your work in screen in the last, you know, decade or so, and that's in The Descendants and the movie Jerry Maguire. And the reason I picked those two parts is because they're small but absolutely crucial parts, and you just utterly believe those characters. They're so incredibly lived in. Start with Jerry Maguire, where you play the father of the star quarterback who sort of casually stabs the hero character in the back, as almost as easy as breathing air.
You know, that was a great opportunity, and I did something in that movie that I don't like about myself, that I find very egotistical as I look back on it, because I really wanted to be in that movie, but the part was so small. I think I had one scene in it, but I wanted to work with Tom Cruise. I wanted to see what this guy was all about, this young kid who I think is so talented. And I went to New York doing after I was cast in it. Oh, but the thing I forgot to tell you is when I did the movie, I said, you know, I don't want any credit for the movie. I'll just appear in it, which I think was so stupid of me to do that. I mean, what the hell?
I was trying to understand why you did that.
Yeah, just dumb.
There's no record of you in that movie.
Egotistical. I mean, I should have taken credit for it. But anyway, that aside, I went to New York publicizing something else with my wife and I. Wendy would always go there to, I'd get her with me when we'd do things like that, to have a little mini vacation there too. And so we're sitting in one of our favorite sushi restaurants there, and she says, and I'm about ready to start the movie in 2 or 3 days. I'm going to be working with Tom Cruise. And she says, isn't that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman sitting in that other corner there? And I'm nearsighted and I can't really see. She says, I think it is. She says, you ought to go over there. Have you met him yet? I said, no. I said, you ought to go over there on the way out and say hello to him. I said, okay, so we walk over, and he says, what are you doing here? He says, you're supposed to be back in L.A. We're supposed to start shooting. He says, when are you going back? I said, I'm flying out in the morning. He says, how are you flying out? I said, oh my God, a United flight? He says, no, you go in my jet. So So I'm all excited. I get back to the hotel, and I'm mostly excited because I'm going to save maybe a couple $1,000 flying home. And so I immediately called to cancel my reservation. The bad story on me was, you know how airlines are. It was too late to cancel my reservation. But I'm still, you know, I'm going flying. My wife and I are flying back with Tom Cruise and his thing. And they, you know, his people would call me every once in a while in the morning. They'd say, you know, okay, we're going to be at this, on this street here from that exit of the hotel. And then they would change that, and they moved it all around. And finally, a place was picked. We go out there, and man, he had the stretch limo there, and behind it was every vehicle that you can imagine. This is in New York, you know, lined up, waiting to see him, waiting to follow his thing. And so they grab us, they charge us in, and we jump into the back of his limo. We speed through the city of New York. All these people on motorcycles, bicycles, everything following. Hey, Tom, you know. Then we get into a helicopter. I thought we were going right, you know, to his jet. Right now, I get to a helicopter. Whew, helicopter goes up, and we get to his jet, and I'm just like this. But he's such a down-to-earth guy. I don't know if any of you guys have worked with him or met him. He's a very nice man, and I was impressed too. I kind of. Well, no. Anyway, so we get into the jet, and when we're flying there, he goes up, you know, because he's a pilot too, and he's up there with a pilot, and I hear this shriek up there, and I thought, oh my God, what happened? And he just got word that, what was the movie he did when he's climbing the mountain, you know?
The first Mission
Mission
Impossible?
Impossible, yeah. And they had just got word that they had destroyed all, you know, records monetarily, and he had heard that news, and he came out. But it was great. We visited on the thing, and now we're in there shooting. And Cameron Crowe, young director, and I'm doing the scene. Now I recognized that the scene, although it was just one scene in the movie, it was a very pivotal scene, because for his character especially, because he's challenged really for the first time.
Set the whole action of the movie
he's
going
really
in
challenged,
a lot of ways.
but a very brief scene. It's not much. So we're doing it, and Tom is doing this thing where I don't know if he does this all the time, but he would say a line, and if he didn't like it, he would just repeat it again, you know. And he was kind of, you know, revving himself up and stuff. And I just going along with that. And we finished a couple of takes, and I went over to Cameron Crowe, and I said, Cameron, you know, I said, the scene is going pretty good, but I said, I think we can go deeper with this. I said, will you let me say some stuff to Tom and kind of get him going? He says, yeah, okay, you can do it. So I went to Tom, and I said, you know, Tom, I said, I got to tell you, I'm so disappointed. I said, you know, this is an important scene, and you are just, you know, scratching the surface here. I said, and I want to tell you another thing, too. I've been around the block a few times in this industry, and that fucking jet doesn't mean shit to me. and I see Tom kind of, like this, and Cameron Crowe says, roll it, you know. We do the scene.
Oh my
Tom
gosh.
is great. And then after the take is over, Tom leans over. He says, do it again. But you know,
I knew there was a reason I liked that scene.
I'm so happy that his latest one is just, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm so happy he's really got back to it. I mean, he's a great guy. I liked him a lot. I had a lot of fun with him.
And now the Descendants kind of pulled back the part that Hawaii played in your life, which was a significant part, and was kind of a way for you to express that part of your life.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting there. I'd worked with George Clooney, who my wife has a serious crush on. Not unlike a lot of other women.
Yeah, a lot of wives have that affliction.
And girlfriends, yeah. Another great guy, by the way. Oh, man. And I did The Good German with him.
That's right.
Steven Soderbergh directed. And so I knew George. Very happy to work with him again. And I also have a home in Kauai where they were filming. And the bar that they were filming the scene was my buddy's bar, Christian Marsden, and the Tahiti Nui. It's a landmark bar. It's been there a long time. So I got Christian to sit right next to me when we did the scene. It was a lot of fun. But you know, something that pops in my head that I want to talk about a little bit because of what we all do here too. And I haven't talked about this to anybody. I mean, I've talked about some of it, but the day I landed on Kauai to start my work on this movie, I talked to my doctor and realized that I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of prostate cancer, and then I was going to have my prostate removed, and then it was, you know, it was kind of a huge health crisis for me. It was the biggest one. I had a back operation a long time ago, but this was a big one. And, you know, that's something that we all have to deal with too as actors, you know. It's like an athlete, you know, it's like playing hurt or playing when your world, you know, is not as you would like it to be, where you can just relax. You have to get your shit together and go in there and do it. And it was a great opportunity to work with George, and again, a small role. I took credit this time.
A pivotal role, too.
But another pivotal scene, you know, a couple of scenes, I guess I had in there. But what I found, what happened was this, you know, for me, what was a crisis in my life informed my work. And I let it in, you know. I didn't try to say, oh, shit, I got to, you know, suck it up and forget that that's happening to me. I just kind of let that come into this guy, this old hippie dude, you know, who was sitting in this bar talking to George Clooney. And I let it come in and be part of my work, you know, of who I was.
Wow.
And by the way, now I'm 5 years okay, you know, from that, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know that you know, looking pretty good, and on your second Emmy nomination for this Showtime series kind of answers the question about the end of that story. But this has been a real gift, this role. You stay in the water long enough, then a big wave comes along, right?
That's it, yeah.
And
how did you know I'm a surfer?
Yeah, I know everything about you, man.
Okay.
This has been maybe of all of these parts, this may have been the best one yet. Talk about him, and also that experience that we alluded to earlier that your father went through as a blacklisted actor must inform a little bit of this world and the world that guy lives in.
Yeah, back in that time.
Yeah, back in that time, and I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Yeah, well, I was, you know, when McCarthy was doing his thing, I was like in grade school, and I remember the first time I became aware of it, is someone came up to me as a little kid and showed me, look, your father's on this list. And I could tell by the way he said it that it was not a list that you wanted to be on, right? And I said, well, you know, I looked at it, and I couldn't, you know, I didn't know most of the names of the people that were there, except I saw one name on there, and to this day, I think it's so interesting that name was there, Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Who was, as you know, was a very conservative politically guy, and everything. How he got on that list, I don't know. Maybe Mickey was a little suspect, I don't know. But
I never trust Donald.
But I remember I saw that, and I figured, well, it can't be that bad, you know. But that was when I first heard about it, and then over the years, I became very aware of it, of course. What a dark, terrible, terrible time. I mean, you know, for a lot of reasons, but in the acting family, you know, I mean, tearing friendships apart, you know, just destroying lives. My dad's best friend was Larry Parks, who was kind of their fair-haired boy, the one that they went after because he had just been nominated for an Academy Award for Al Jolson's story. And they wanted somebody with a lot of, you know, notoriety that they could pin it on. And my folks and the Parks, Betty Garrett Parks, his wife, they were part of the Actors Lab, which was, like the group theater moving to the West. And, at that time, socialism was one of the interesting, political paths that people were talking about. Russia was our ally, Young people were checking it out. My mom and dad went to like 1 or 2 meetings and didn't like it, so they didn't go to any more. And, and so when Larry, they got him first, and these young people, getting up in front of these guys, these jerk-offs who were making a lot of noise, these politicians and McCarthy and all his dogs, they were nervous. They didn't know what to say, Larry said stuff that, later on maybe he regretted. He talked about people that he'd seen at some of these meetings. Well, people, his friends, just wrote him off, and destroyed his career. My father, he was called up to the committee, and he did what a lot of people did, was he named people he'd seen at the meeting that were dead. He named dead people. And he named the president, the head of the Communist Party, who everyone knew, so. But because my father did that, a lot of people wrote him off too, did not want to be his friend anymore. So you had friendships broken, destroyed. My father and Larry Parks kept their friendship all through their lives. And Betty Garrett Parks, who recently passed away, was like a second mom to me. I also know that there were people that did not name names that were decided the right thing to do was to be silent totally, and their careers were destroyed, or they had to change their names. I mean, it was just an awful, awful thing to happen, especially when we are the storytellers. We're the ones that need to lift up the rocks and tell people what's going on, and they just hog-tied us. And I hope that never happens again. I mean, I don't think it will.
But now going into this culture of repression that you're showing on this show, and I mean, am I right in understanding you did not know your character was a gay man when you started to play him? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when I first found out about the role, I was in Broadway doing How to Succeed in Business without really trying. That was my night job. That was a challenge. I'd never sung and danced on Broadway. Doing that at my age, it was pretty crazy. And they filmed the pilot for Masters of Sex in New York, and I thought it was a great script. I knew all about Masters Johnson. I grew up in the 50s, so I remember when that book came out and all the stuff about human sexuality. And I say, my guy, he's Masters' mentor. He's the provost of this major university where the sex experiments were happening. I think that, this would be fun. This is a good role. And then we were all excited when we got the pickup, and have a Christmas party, and my wife is there with me, and the execs come up to me, and they're kind of stroking me and saying, we're so happy you're in the show, and we're looking forward to it. It's going to be very exciting. And I'm kind of pumped up, and my wife said she kind of saw it coming, and Michelle Ashford, the exec of the show, says, and we had this wonderful twist for your character. Now I'm thinking in my mind, this guy, he's a provost of this big university. There's all this sexual stuff that's going to be happening behind the scenes. I'm probably going to be getting it on with all these young girls, at the cheerleaders and stuff, And I said, what is it? What's the twist? I said, you're gay. And my wife lost it, because she knew right where my head was going, the whole thing. But then once the smoke cleared and I thought about it, I said, wow, this is going to be a great opportunity to tell this story about this closeted gay man, powerful man in the 50s. I remember the ignorance that was afoot in the land at that time was intense, and I can be part of this story. This is going to be great. And I'd played transgender people twice by that time. I did Looking for Normal
That's right.
with my son Jordan at the Geffen, which was I did the original play. I originated the character Jane Anderson play that was later made into the movie Normal, which I think Tom got nominated for Academy Award.
That's right.
Tom
Wilkinson.
Tom
Yeah,
Wilkinson,
thank you.
right. So that was a great experience doing that play, playing transgender. My son Jordan got to call me a half-baked cunt every night. I'm sure he was very excited about.
See, everything comes full circle,
And
right?
slapped me across the face
Yeah.
every night. But that's not being gay. You know, that's a different experience. And then I did another transgender character on The Closer, but to play a gay man, that was going to be interesting. And I've had a ball doing it. And I think we've come a long ways, but I think I still know young people who are afraid to come out because they don't think their community is going to accept them or their parents aren't going to accept them. And it's just a tragedy. And so we get to, work with that material, and it's a blessing. It's a good role. I'm enjoying it, and it's all come down to the words, don't you think? I mean,
Right.
The play's the thing, right? The way Will said it a long time ago. If you got the good words, you're, halfway there, or more than halfway there.
Well, I have I have so many more things I want to ask you about, but we're running out of time, so I want to ask you one last thing, and I apologize for not getting into all the questions on the thing, but when you were just starting out your career, you had said that you wished for two things, that you had either been born 6'5", so you could play basketball, or 6'6", so you could play professional basketball, or at least play on a high level collegiately, or you had a stronger chin.
Yeah.
So,
Oh God, my
so
chin.
are you glad that neither of those wishes came true, or
My father used to do, God bless him. He had this whole thing. He got reading these books about dynamic tension. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Like this and stuff like this. And so he said, "Son," and he was dead serious. He wasn't screwing with me. He said, "Son, do this." And I seriously tried it, and I think I shoved my chin a little farther back. It's terrible. Yeah, I have a lot of makeup under here, so it gives me the shadow of the chin that never was. But the basketball thing, I don't know if 6'5" would have helped me. There's a lot of really great basketball players that are my size.
Yeah, but you did pretty good at 5'10" with with not much of a chin.
Yeah.
Thank you. It has been a great pleasure talking to you and going through your career.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. What a pleasure being with you guys.
Yeah.
I loved it.